This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm Catherine Malan, standing in for Eben Jansen today. The show is live and broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We are also streaming live on YouTube with the entire show available on our YouTube channel all day long. Today, Judge Thokozile Masipa is expected to deliver her final verdict in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial live on this channel in about 30 minutes' time. Today we'll be live outside the court. We talk to a legal expert in studio and we also take a look at what you've been saying on social media about the case. But first, Anine Dormel has a news update.
Good morning, I'm Anine Dormel. Let's have a look at the stories making headlines today. Oscar Pistorius will find out today if he's guilty of culpable homicide. Yesterday, Judge Thokozile Masipa acquitted Pistorius of murdering his girlfriend, Eva Steenkamp, during the first half of the judgment. She did find that Pistorius was negligent when he fired the shots that killed Steenkamp.
How could the accused reasonably have foreseen that the shot he fired would kill the deceased? Clearly, he did not subjectively foresee this as a possibility that he would kill the person behind the door, let alone the deceased, as he thought she was in the bedroom at the time. The accused, therefore, cannot be found guilty of murder dolus eventualis.
In a letter released to the media, President Jacob Zuma has told Public Protector Thuli Madonsela that her reports are not judgments. The president says he disagrees with her view that her reports can only be reviewed and set aside by a court of law and not by ministers or the cabinet. This is contained in the letter, written in a response to her reminder that he has failed to heed her findings on Nkandla. Authorities in Mpumalanga are concerned about the continuous use of open trucks to transport farm workers following another horrific crash in the province late yesterday. 6 farm workers were killed when the truck they were travelling in collided with another vehicle on the road between Hazyview and White River. US lawmakers have pledged to support for President Barack Obama's plan to expand the military fight against Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria. Earlier this week, Obama announced he would lead an alliance to root out IS after he sent a panel of top administration officials to the capital to make the case to the US Congress for broadening operations against the group, which include US airstrikes in Syria and more military advisors in Iraq. European Union governments have agreed to begin their new sanctions against Russia over the Ukrainian crisis today, but could lift them next month if Moscow abides by a fragile truce. These steps are the latest by the EU following Russia's annexation of Crimea in March. And those are your top stories for today. Catherine, back to you.
Well, thank you, Anine. Yes, Oscar Pistorius will find out today if he's guilty of culpable homicide. Judge Thokozile Masipa acquitted Pistorius of murdering his girlfriend, Eva Steenkamp, during the first half of her judgment yesterday. However, she found that he had been negligent when he fired the shots that killed her.
The state failed to prove that the athlete intended to shoot Steenkamp.
The timelines, as set out in the chronology of events, tip the scales in favor of the accused version in general.
Neither could it prove premeditated murder.
How could the accused reasonably have foreseen that the shot he fired would kill the deceased? Clearly, he did not subjectively foresee this as a possibility that he would kill the person behind the door, let alone the deceased, as he thought she was in the bedroom at the time. The accused, therefore, cannot be found guilty of murder dolus eventualis.
But the judge did find a degree of negligence on his part.
The accused knew that there was a person behind the toilet door. He chose to use a firearm, which was a lethal weapon. he was competent in the use of firearms as he had undergone some training.
Experts say this points to a conviction.
It appears very much that the judge is heading towards that direction in finding that Mr. Pistorius acted negligently, which is a different form of culpa or guilt, and accordingly held him accountable on the basis of culpable homicide in that he acted negligently.
Probably one of the most trying days for Oscar Pistorius in court. The athlete wept silently several times while listening to proceedings. Also a tough and emotional day for the Pistorius and the Steenkamp families. But despite a seemingly more favorable outcome, it's not over just yet for the Paralympian. Judge Thokozile Masipa is yet to address several firearm-related charges. Mangoba Mchunu, SABC News at the North Gauteng High Court.
Yes, Paralympian blade runner Oscar Pistorius will know his fate today as Judge Thokozile Masipa is expected to finalise her judgment on the trial that has lasted over 6 months. Now to our reporter Griselda Lewis, who's been keeping us up to date from outside the court the last couple of months. Morning, Griselda.
Well, a very good morning to you.
Griselda, I want to start off. Judge Masipa cut straight to the chase yesterday and already ruled out murder, premeditated murder. Are we expecting a shorter day today in court?
Well, that is possible. What we're expecting Judge Thokozile Masipa to do this morning is to continue on giving reasons why she believes that Oscar Pistorius was negligent when he pulled the trigger 4 times, shooting and killing Reeva Steenkamp. You'll recall yesterday she gave us a slight indication of what could possibly be a conviction of culpable homicide for Oscar Pistorius inside the North Gauteng High Court today. Basically, what Judge Thokozile Masipa is saying is that Oscar Pistorius could have used other means before he pulled that trigger. Perhaps he could have gone to the balcony to go and shout for help when he heard the sounds coming from the bathroom door. And also, she asked questions about why Oscar Pistorius shot 4 times. Why didn't he at least shoot once? And also that Oscar Pistorius went to go look for Reeva Steenkamp only after he had pulled that trigger. So really questions arising. What we're looking forward to today is to try and establish whether Oscar Pistorius at all will go to jail. We're looking strictly now at the culpable homicide charges as well, not forgetting the other 3 charges relating to the contravention of the Firearms Control Act.
Now, Griselda, can you just set the scene for us outside court? What is it like with the media and family and Oscar arriving this morning?
Well, certainly there's been quite a media frenzy outside court this morning. As you've rightly pointed out, Oscar Pistorius will know his fate this morning. So the media contingent here behind me is quite strong, and Oscar Pistorius actually arrived just a few minutes ago to a media scrum. That's, of course, before you went on air. And, Barry Steenkamp, June Steenkamp as well, also arriving at court. I'm sure they're quite anxious to know what Judge Masipa's final verdict will be in this matter. You would know that Barry Steenkamp, for example, has not been doing too well, but both he and June Steenkamp really haven't showed any emotion inside court, not even when Judge Thokozile Masipa had ruled out premeditated murder and also murder yesterday. But what we do know is that the Steenkamp family will address the media once Judge Thokozile Masipa is done with the full verdict. Whether Oscar Pistorius' uncle will give out a statement as he usually does, that all, of course, also remains to be seen.
Griselda, just take us inside the court, the mood in court. What did we see from Oscar yesterday and then Reeva's family, as you mentioned?
Well, Reeva Steenkamp's family not showing much emotion at all, but certainly I did see, Barry Steenkamp. The only emotion or sort of action that I saw him do yesterday is when he leaned forward, and that's about all you got from Barry Steenkamp. You know, in the morning I'd often ask him, "How are you doing, Mr. Steenkamp?" And he'll just say that he is fine. Well, June Steenkamp often just walks past the media, does not say anything, but Oscar Pistorius certainly breaking down several times yesterday as Judge Masipa went through his version of events, and he really sobbed quite strongly, out loudly, when Judge Masipa had spoken about the premeditated murder and the fact that she did not think that Oscar Pistorius had intended to shoot and kill Reeva Steenkamp. So whether that was a sigh of relief on that main charge, I cannot say, but certainly he couldn't contain his emotions yesterday throughout several parts of the verdict.
Griselda, we saw a lot of debating on Twitter yesterday, those being pro and negative. What is it like in front of the court? Are we seeing any Oscar supporters there this morning?
Well, there was always going to be the court of public opinion, and people always have had, their take on what's been happening here in the Oscar Pistorius trial. But certainly what we're getting from law experts is that we've got to thread very carefully in that in this instance, it's only the law that is going to apply here. South Africa doesn't have a jury system, and the only person who's going to make the decision about Oscar Pistorius' fate is Judge Thokozile Masipa, together with her assessors, taking into account how she interprets the evidence that was led inside this court. So, we had a lot of, negativity on Twitter. Some legal experts as well, the legal fraternity, questioning Judge Thokozile Masipa on whether she was correct to say that Oscar Pistorius did not anticipate that when he pulled the trigger, he would have killed someone behind that door. So a lot of criticism coming from the legal fraternity saying that Oscar Pistorius, when he went to go and arm himself, he certainly knew that if he pulled that trigger. Let me just turn towards my left. I'm just being alerted that something is taking place here at the moment. As you can see, there's Oscar Pistorius' father once again arriving at court. He was not here yesterday. He's arriving on the final day of the verdict to hear his son's fate. And certainly we've heard during the course of this trial as well about an estranged relationship between Oscar Pistorius and his father. But his father is here today. We'll try and certainly see if we can't have a word with him after this, after Judge Masipa has finished handing down her verdict. But certainly very interesting to see him here on this final day as well. How the Pistorius family will react. You would know that Judge Masipa has slightly given an indication towards the end of the court day yesterday when she said that Oscar Pistorius, as you did point out, was negligent when he pulled that trigger. So when Judge Masipa, we're expecting her to start on that this morning, on whether Oscar Pistorius is guilty or not on culpable homicide. So certainly that remains to be seen. And, the other charges as well, we must not forget that she is still yet to pronounce on the other charges relating to an incident that allegedly happened at an upmarket restaurant in Melrose Arc, as well as allegations that Oscar Pistorius had shot through a sunroof, and the allegations of illegal or ammunition that was found in his safe at his Pretoria home at the crime scene. So that remains to be seen what happens at 9:30 this morning. Certainly everybody is waiting to see how the curtain will fall on Oscar Pistorius today.
Well, Griselda, thank you so much for joining us this morning, keeping us up to date there from outside court, where Judge Thokozile Masipa is expected to deliver her final judgment today. You can follow Griselda on Twitter, #SABC News, for all the latest regarding the Oscar Pistorius trial today. Now, Judge Thokozile Masipa found that the state had failed to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Pistorius had intentionally murdered the girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp. There has been mixed reactions after the pronouncement that Pistorius could not be found guilty of murder. She, however, found that Pistorius had acted negligently when he shot and killed the 29-year-old model at his home on Valentine's Day last year. To unpack more of these legal matters, here with us in studio, we are again joined by Bernard Hortz, legal expert and head of the Worksman's Attorneys Business Crime and Forensics Practice. Morning, Bernard. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Katrine. Thank you.
You've been here since the start of the trial, and now we're here finally nearing the end. Tell us, as a legal expert, was it surprising yesterday?
Katrina, I think most of us are surprised. When I talk about most of us, I'm talking about from the legal fraternity, because the issue, I think we need to be clear. Let's dispel the notion of premeditated murder, dolus directus. I do not think that the state proved, remember, beyond reasonable doubt is the scale. I do not think that the state proved beyond reasonable doubt that Oscar intended to murder Reeva Steenkamp. That's step number one. But step number two, if you remember the video footage of Oscar at the shooting range with that watermelon, do you remember when we saw him shoot and we saw the devastating effect that the bullet had on that watermelon? Now you have a man who's used to using his firearm. He understands the effect of what will happen when he shoots his firearm. Now we go to dolus directus. It doesn't matter who was standing behind that door. He knew, he foresaw that if he were to shoot 4 shots through that door, and he knows his own bathroom, he knows what the layout of his own bathroom is, he ought to have foreseen that shooting 4 times behind that door, the person who was behind that door, there would be a devastating effect by firing his firearm 4 times through that door. That's dolus eventualis. Now, so there's a little bit of confusion, but the judge has ruled that out, and the judge has said he was negligent to shoot, not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. He was negligent to do that. So I think from a legal perspective, I think a lot of us are confused. However, we must remember we are armchairs. We are armchair observers. The judge is the one who's heard every bit of evidence, and it's up to her to interpret that evidence, come out with a verdict, and perhaps we might see an appeal.
Not guilty of premeditated murder. That's what we were told yesterday. So next up, it's culpable homicide. Can you just go into that a bit and tell us what are the charges relating to culpable homicide, and are we likely to see that?
Well, not guilty of premeditated murder. That's what we call dolus directus. I hatched a plan to do this. I did it. Not guilty of that. Never ever said he should be guilty of that because it was very difficult for the state to prove that. But dolus eventualis, still murder. That's where the confusion arises. That's the foreseeability of what my actions are going to do, and I nevertheless go ahead and commit those acts. The judge has found him not guilty of dolus eventualis. We're now looking at culpable homicide, negligent to do what I did. I think that what the judge is saying, she has found his testimony to be less than acceptable in a number of respects. She's found him to have been negligent in the way that he reacted. She should have done other things. So I think we may be looking at a conviction on culpable homicide, the negligent discharge of his firearm, which had the effect of causing the death of Reba Steenkamp.
Now, the state did not prove beyond reasonable doubt that Pistorius intended to kill Reba. What was lacking in the evidence then?
I don't think from day one were we aware of any evidence that the state had to be able to prove that because of something that happened between Oscar Pistorius and the late Reba Steenkamp, he had hatched a plan to murder her that evening. That evidence has never been there. It would have been nice had the evidence been there, but the evidence has never been there. So I think what the state really was going on was you said it was an intruder. You said that you acted in self-defense. We believe something different. We heard the evidence. We heard the evidence of neighbors saying they heard screams. We heard the evidence of the improbability of the version, moving fans. Why did you not look next to you to see if the late Reba Steenkamp was there? Why didn't you do all of these things? The state was relying, I believe, on the fact of dolus eventualis. Notwithstanding all of that, you made a conscious decision to fire your gun through that door 4 times, and you ought to have known that whoever was on the other side would have been harmed in a deadly way.
Then just to clarify, could a different judge have made a difference?
We're up to, you see, we've got to look at the law, the evidence, and obviously the human factor. Every single person, and now we're talking about lawyers, but every single person considers evidence in a different way, weighs things up in a different way, and that's why we have courts of appeal, because the test is on appeal. Could another court reasonably possibly come to a different conclusion based on the same evidence? And that's really what an appeal is all about.
Now, there's a word on the street is that the state is devastated after yesterday's findings. Are we seeing an appeal after this?
Well, I would imagine that the state would be concerned. I would imagine that the state would want to appeal. And as I say, the test is going to be, bearing in mind, we don't have a retrial. There's no more witnesses standing in witness boxes. The appeal court simply looks at the evidence, the transcript of evidence, listens to the argument from the state side and from the defence's side, and the appeal court will then make its ruling.
So, Oscar Pistorius, should he be relieved after yesterday?
Let me say this to you. On culpable homicide, if he's convicted on culpable homicide, it does not necessarily mean that there will be no jail time. It's just the extent of the jail time that may vary. So I think he should be relieved that he hasn't been convicted of dolus eventualis. I think yes. But I think we're going to have to wait and see what Judge Masipa does on her findings today and what the sentence may be.
Well, Bernard, thank you so much for joining us and joining us throughout the trial on the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. Our legal expert from Worksman's Attorneys, Bernard Hortz. Let's just now take a look at what's been happening on social media regarding the Oscar Pistorius trial. Oscar Pistorius falling leaves legal, hashtag experts, hashtag shock. There you've got all of the Oscar Pistorius tweets this morning, the hashtags to follow. Later on in the show, we'll also look at some social media stats to see what's been happening. Strange how those that disagree with the Oscar verdict have started attacking judges' integrity and qualifications. What exactly is your intention with the bullets that shatter on impact? Hashtag Oscar judgment, hashtag Oscar trial. Of course, one of the biggest stories globally on social media. Simply, just as those have their opinion that Oscar is guilty, other people might too have their opinion that he is innocent. In his version, Oscar could easily have spoken to Riva, both slipped past the bathroom, gone downstairs and called for why shoot at the toilet after all these questions. Everybody's a lawyer these days on social media as well, as we've been seeing throughout the duration of the trial. Well, let's just now take a look at some other news and some front pages from around the globe this morning. Well, of course, it's Oscar Pistorius is one of the biggest stories globally at the moment. There you have the Financial Times with a picture of a sobbing Pistorius in court yesterday. Down under, the Australian reporting on the latest on the U.S. war against terror. President Barack Obama's plan to expand the military fight against Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria. Then the Miami Herald remembering the 13th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attack on the World Trade Center yesterday. Now today we remember Steve Biko, leader of the South African Students' Organization and pioneer of the Black Consciousness philosophy. He died in police custody at the age of 30 today in 1977. Biko was arrested in the outskirts of Grahamstown on the 18th of August 1977. The following interview we found on YouTube this morning is a rare interview which he did with a German TV station. Let's take a look.
We see a completely non-racial society. We don't believe, for instance, in the so-called guarantees for minority rights, because guaranteeing minority rights implies the recognition of portions of the community on a race basis. We believe that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people. And those people will have the same status before the law, and they will have the same political rights before the law. So in a sense, it will be a completely non-racial egalitarian society.
But will the vast number of blacks, after all their experiences, be able to live a life without giving vent to feelings of revenge, of
Yes, we believe it is the duty of the vanguard political movement which brings about change to educate people's outlooks. I mean, in the same way that blacks have never lived in a socialist economic system, they're going to learn to live in one. In the same way that they've always lived in a racially divided society, they've got to learn to live in a non-racial society. They've got many things to learn, and all these must be brought to them and explained to the people by the vanguard movement, which is
Go on. Go explore. Go with the waves. Lead the brave. Go bold. Go strong. Try. Dare. Go everywhere. To oceans where no one's gone.
Well, hello and welcome back. You're with Newsroom on SABC News. Never has the appetite for the Oscar Pistorius murder trial been more evident than on social media. Throughout the trial, everyone became an instant legal expert via comments on Twitter, Facebook, websites, pages, you name it. Why are we all so interested? Well, to answer that question and to discuss more about what we've been seeing on social media trends is independent media monitoring specialist Tonya Curry from Roy Africa. Tonya, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Katrine. Thanks for having me.
Tonya, I read this morning, biggest story globally.
Hands down. Full stop. Draw a line under that sentence. It dwarfed every other international and local story on the planet. I have never seen anything like it. Hitting 400,000 unique articles. I mean, on the day, during the duration of the trial, I mean, we've been watching the entire trial, and when Harry now opened his cross-examination and cross-examined Oscar Pistorius, that hit 141,000. Yesterday we sat on 400,000. So almost twice or more than twice the amount of conversation and news reporting across the world.
This even compared to the 9/11 13th anniversary that we saw yesterday.
9/11 didn't come close. I think we put 9/11, Ebola, Gaza, Ray White, a couple of other people on the chart, and they came in at under 10% of the coverage against Oscar's 90%. That's internationally, Katrine. So, I mean, we think we're flooded with media messages here in South Africa. Oh, there it is there. So
I know, we've got the stats here. Let's just start at the top. If you can just take us through all of the graphics that we see right here.
Well, there's a timeline on the left-hand side. So you can see that we went from almost nothing to a massive peak. This was yesterday at about I think it was 8 or 9 o'clock, the trial started peaking. And then when Judge Masipa said that he wasn't guilty of murder, it came to 85,000 in an hour. So huge.
That's why, do you immediately see a peak in the statistics as announcements like that are made?
Exactly. What was also interesting is what people started saying. People started saying, he got away with murder. That was a term that was used in an enormous amount, I mean, almost 30% of the time. 31% referred to the fact that he was a celebrity, and that's why the verdict swayed in his favour, so far anyway. And what's worrying, Katrine, from our country's perspective is the number of references to race. People are saying it's because he's white internationally, and locally we're saying if he was black, it would be very different. Also lots of references to Juju and his case as well. So on the international scale, I mean, given that this is the biggest story ever, we're not being viewed very, very positively in international media.
With regards to Judge Thokozile Masipa's finding that he will not be found guilty on premeditated murder, what was that like? Were positive or negative response? What were we seeing?
Well, in the beginning, Judge Masipa had some really good positive sentiments. People spoke about her really highly. And it is interesting to me how it sways automatically within hours. I mean, we've got, I think it's in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see that there's 75% of the sentiment on Judge Masipa overnight was negative. I think only 0.73% came in as positive.
We see it there on the left-hand side at Masipa's sentiment, right? The
yes,
neutral,
right.
And then the positive, it's 73, as you can see it there. Then Oscar Pistorius versus other South African local stories. How did that do?
Well, at the top two tell a very interesting story, and that's indicative of what's been going on in the world in general about the trial. So overnight, we've had stories about Thuli Madonsela, Jacob Zuma, Ebola. I think they found the first South African with the virus, and also Sasol came under fire a bit this morning. So if you put those all in news media, you as journalists are feeding us a relatively balanced amount of media. I mean, 47% of the reporting overnight was about the Oscar trial. But if you take those same stories and you put them into social media on the right, 99.82% of the time we prefer to talk about Oscar.
Wow.
Crazy.
And then compared internationally?
Internationally, exactly the same thing. I think all those big stories that I spoke about earlier, only 10% contributed to social media. There it is at the bottom. You can see even like Apple releasing their new phone and watch. I mean, that's a big story for the States, right? And the States contributes a very enormous part to our social media studies. And they're coming in at only 1.03% against Oscar Pistorius. It's crazy.
I also read an interesting article yesterday, it was in The Guardian,
Yes.
saying that the Paralympians trial has attracted more media attention than Mandela's funeral.
Isn't that sad? That is sad. I mean,
Is it true?
we did, yes, it's very true. We did the analysis on Nelson Mandela's funeral, and it came in at about 2 million overall over the entire period. Look, you've also got to take into account that the Oscar Pistorius trial has been going on forever, you know. So when you're measuring over time, there is a lot more press for Oscar, probably 3 times more press. So, I mean, but Nelson Mandela's funeral only drew out over a short period of time. So it's a little bit of an unfair statistic, but it certainly is true.
Why then, just to wrap, are we so obsessed with this trial?
I think because it is, you couldn't make it up. It's like Hollywood couldn't have written the story themselves. You know, you had a Valentine's Day murder, a celebrity that was a hero internationally and locally, that he is disabled. So he's a story of courage and hope. And then on Valentine's Day, kills his gorgeous girlfriend by accident, apparently, and then has the judgment released on September 11th. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So the attraction from consumers is just enormous. And the world was really holding its breath yesterday, and I think the world was a little bit disappointed.
Well, Tonya, thank you so much for joining us today. And you've been throughout the duration of this trial following us. Where can people get more of your statistics if they want?
Thank you, Katrina. They can go to our website, roiafrica.com, or they can have a look at our Twitter handles, at roiafrica or at Tonya, Tonya, ROI.
Well, Tonya, thank you so much. We'll be sure to also upload that website to our Facebook page, and then you can access it from there. Let's just take a look at what you've been saying on social media. Let's not forget our heroes, what they fought and died for. Hashtag Steve Biko, of course, remembering Steve Biko today, who died today in 1977 in police custody. The most potent weapon of the oppressor is the mind, the oppressed. Hashtag Steve Biko, black consciousness. Ntuli Biko lay dead on a cold grey cement floor this day in 1977. Everybody sending in their thoughts on Steve Biko. There you have a lovely picture, if you can just have a look at that. Of course, remembering all of this. And of course, we've also got it uploaded on our Facebook page. You can go drop us your comments there and let us know how you will remember this day, how it affected you. Now, let's just take a look at what's been happening on our Newsroom Facebook page. Today, we see that the Mpumalanga Safety, Security and Liaison MEC, Vusi Shongwe, has raised concerns over the continuous use of trucks to transport farm workers. You will also see that Judge Thokozile Masipa will continue handing down her judgment in the Paralympian Oscar Pistorius murder trial this morning, and also the unharmed release of 45 Fijian United Nations peacekeepers that were taken captive by a Syrian rebel group in the Golan Heights 2 weeks ago has been welcomed by the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. You can find all these stories and more on our Newsroom Facebook page. That's Facebook.com/SABC News. Well, time now to take a break. After, we'll have a look if court has started and take you live there. This is Newsroom on SABC News.
Go on. Go explore. Go with the waves. Lead the brave. Go bold. Go strong. Drive. Dare. Go everywhere. To oceans where no one's gone.
Welcome back. Let's just take a look at the news making headlines this morning. Oscar Pistorius will find out today if he's guilty of culpable homicide. Yesterday, Judge Thokozile Masipa acquitted Pistorius of murdering his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp. During the first half of her judgment, she did find that Pistorius was negligent when he fired the shots that killed Steenkamp. I've also now been told that we are live in court and we will be leaving you there. This is Newsroom on SABC News, where we love it in the morning.